Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the show. Today's guest is Eli Moran, a retired supervisory detention deportation officer at ICE and Chief Warrant Officer 5 in the US Navy. I'm glad to see you today, sir, and super excited to have this conversation.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I thought about doing this in the past, but I never really came through. And you gave me that opportunity to do a podcast. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's an honor to talk to you and to learn your story. So I'll let you, in your own words, describe your story. How did you become a chief warrant officer, or maybe before that, how you joined Navy and how your life went from there?
Well, it's very simple. For the Navy, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to join the Navy. I've seen those commercials from the past that, to accelerate your life, join the Navy. And I actually took that for, literally like, hey, this is something I can do when I graduate from high school. Really, that's where everything started. I started preparing myself mentally and physically. And when the time came to enlist, I didn't hesitate. Right after high school, I joined the Navy back in 1987. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and my first duty station was in San Diego. And, I was still not sure, even though I wanted to spend some time in other countries. That's what I was looking at. I was looking to, I can visit all these countries that the Navy talks about. But when it actually set in, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I didn't, like, once you're there, once you're sitting in that position, you're like, okay, now what do I do? And I realized that I needed help as far as where to take my career from there. And so I looked to the senior leadership and asked, hey, what do you think I can do? My ASVAB scores were the minimum just to get into the service. So I wasn't prepared educated wise. Physically, I've always been decent in keeping myself in good shape. But for a career, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. Luckily, I was able to speak to mentors that helped me and guided me through those first 6 months to a year in the Navy. And, looking back at it, honestly, it was an honor, to serve in the military. And that's really what honed me into basically what I'm today and what I finished and how I finished in my career. For those that don't know, it's great and it's bad. It's great because you have an opportunity to see different jobs and then pick something that you want to do. What it's bad is that because you're considered someone who doesn't have the skill and the education to be in let's say, in a fire control position, to be an electronics technician. So you kind of looked at like, oh, this guy or this gal is not, very smart. And you're like, when you hear the rumblings, you're like, I know I can do better than that. And so, you just use that as fire to get you motivated to be something that maybe somebody doesn't think you can do.
Yeah, and you became Chief Warrant Officer 5, which from what I understand is one of the rarest roles ranks in the military. So what's the story behind that? Because I know that to even be, even to become CWO, it goes through the Congress or Senate or something. So could you walk me through that process and how you became that?
Yes. So a lot of people, even in the military, think that a chief warrant officer is a rank somewhere in between an enlisted individual and an officer. So let me make something clear. A chief warrant officer is a commissioned officer. The difference is that for chief warrant officers, we're considered and we are technical experts in a certain field. Like for my field, I was an ordnance technician. Before that, as an enlisted sailor, I was a gunner's mate. And so when I decided that, okay, I need to challenge myself a bit more, what can I do now? At that time, I was an E7, a Navy chief, enlisted chief. And what can I do to better myself? What can I do to contribute more to the Navy? And there's a program called Limited Duty Officer, Chief Warrant Officer Program, which is a program that you can apply to become a naval officer. And that's how I became a warrant officer. So the difference between a regular line officer and a warrant officer is basically um, you're a seasoned enlisted member in my case in the Navy. So I have learned everything that I can at that point for my job as a gunner's mate. So now I'm applying that to a Navy officer career. And so from there, when I can actually say, okay, this missile system needs something is wrong with the missile system, I can actually go work on that system. Whereas unrestricted line officer cannot, because obviously they don't have that background. They haven't been to technical schools that I've attended to. And so that is really the main difference between a unrestricted line officer and a chief warrant officer. Becoming, we call ourselves unicorns, CW5s. There's only a few in the service, whether it's active duty or enlisted. But you get that title as a unicorn only if you become a CW5. It isn't that, it isn't about studying for a test. It isn't about being the most popular person in the military, an icon. No, it's about putting yourself in a position to where people are going to look at you and say, you have answered the call, which means that if there's a military crisis in the world, were you able to deploy? Did you go? Were you physically and mentally prepared? Were all your military requirements up to date? Did you share your goals with other people? Did you help other people and bring them along? And it's not just about yourself, it's about building a team, carrying that team, and making sure that you are representing, in my case, the Navy at the best that I can, at the best abilities that I can in order to succeed in whatever mission, it's in front of you. So that's what it's like to become a CW5 is you're doing everything not for you, you're doing everything for your country, for the service, for the mission, and for your people.
Awesome. And how many years did you serve in the Navy in total?
When I retire on May 1st, 2022, I had just reached a total of 35 years active and reserve time.
So, as a CW5, as an officer, you've probably learned a lot about leadership, and maybe you have some kind of principles or a philosophy that you can share on how to lead people, and maybe something that can also be applied to other areas of life beyond the military.
Yes, I've always believed that principles come from your upbringing, comes from home. And when you embark on a career, you're bringing those principles with you. They should never leave your sight, okay? Believing that you can do anything, being positive and, be ready to serve your country, be ready to serve a mission. It should always be behind who you are. One of the things that I can tell you is that leading by example is critical. Why? Because if you're leading a group of people and telling them to do something that you're not doing, and people will see that right through you. They'll know if you're being honest, and they'll and if you are able to, even when it's tough, even if when you gotta tell your troops, hey, we gotta work until 2000 tonight, and here's why. You let them know the reasons why you're doing it, and that's called being transparent. Having the courage to tell your troops, hey, you're not gonna like what I'm about to say, but I gotta say it. It has to be done. But if you're not, have courage to do unpopular things, it is really hard to be a leader in today's Navy. That's a principle that you can't break. I used to get into situations with my enlisted leadership about something as simple as working hours. Some people wanted to go home early because they just thought that their job was not important. Well, when that happens, you got to be able to rely on your people to pass the word and say, no, this is important. And here's the reason why we're working late, because this needs to be done before we go home. As simple as that. Having the courage to tell your people that goes a long ways. And at the same time, when, you need to reward your people. Let them know, hey, you did a great job for that. We're going to take Friday off. Okay, as long as everything is done and as long as it doesn't interfere with our mission, rewarding your people. That's a basic principle, and then following through on it. Don't just say you're going to do it and then forget about it because, oh, you know what, I forgot that, I can't ask my boss to take a day off or to give us a day off. No, no, no. You got to be able to have, you got to be able to follow through on your word. And those are simple principles that you live by all the time. And that not only translates from my military to my civilian career, but also at home. I would like to be able to tell my kids, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that. But at the same time, I'm not going to go behind their back and do exactly what I said not to do. So, principles start at home, carry them on your career, and then bring them back home again. Same thing. It does not change. Obviously, the players have change, but that's how I see things.
Now, curious to learn after you went into the reserve and you transitioned more into the DHS role, CBP, ICE. What kinds of skills that you learned from the military, from your active duty, helped you succeed in your new positions? And what was different? What was new that you had to learn as you took on new responsibilities and new roles?
I think one of the things that stands out to me is my military bearing, my personal appearance and teamwork. It was those three things that stand out to me right off the bat, which helped me transition into the U.S. Border Patrol. The U.S. Border Patrol is probably the closest thing that you can relate to as far as feeling like you're in the military. Their requirements were very strict, just like the military. You had to shave every day. Your uniform has to be squared away all the time. Your boots shined. So for me, those things were easy to transition to. Whereas a lot of my colleagues who, for the first time, they were going to be wearing a uniform and were going to be in a paramilitary environment, it was very tough. And a lot of those people did not make it because they just couldn't get past the simple things as making sure your uniform is ready for work, making sure your boots are clean. And for me, that was an easy transition. Shaving every day. It was something that, okay, I had to do. And I make this an important topic or issue because a lot of people didn't want to follow this simple direction was to shave. And again, it goes back to my military days. It became something that you do every day. Another aspect was, teamwork. Just like in the military, Border Patrol was about teamwork, building a team, contributing to the team, producing for the team. That didn't change. Now, the difficult part here was that again, you have people from all different backgrounds. We have some prior law enforcement, we had some prior military, but even military guys, I was a Navy guy. I had Army, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard colleagues that, even though you're in the military, you still don't talk the same language. And so, that was still a challenge for me. But, my mindset that, I can do anything just prevailed. And I was able to do well at the academy because, we had exams, written exams. We had physical fitness that we had to pass in order to graduate from the Border Patrol Academy. And it was difficult, but it was possible because of my commitment and because of the mindset that I had that I was not going to fail and that I was going to do my best regardless of what type of environment I was in.
Also, I want to touch upon the topic of mentorship. I know in the military, I've spoke to many people from NCOs all the way to general officers, and it seems like mentorship has been very important to many people, whether it's learning from someone or giving back to other soldiers, or if it's in the civilian context. So what's your perspective on mentorship, and have you had an opportunity to mentor someone?
So, luckily, I've met some great people in my life. One of the first individuals, and I want to say his name because it's an honor to have served under him and with him, Chief Akers, who later became a naval officer as well. It was probably within a year if not less, when he was assigned to our unit. And I was, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was confused as to where I was and what really, what my mission was going to be and how I was going to help and who was going to help me. Well, this chief came along and took me under his wing and said, hey, I'm going to make sure that you're on the right track. I'm going to make sure that you know what you're doing, and I'm going to make sure that you succeed in your career. And just by somebody telling me those things, it was like, wow, it felt good, gave me confidence, which is at that time I lacked some confidence as to what I was doing. So he gave me confidence, showed me, put me on track, basically, on a road to success. I still had to do all the work, of course. He wasn't just gonna, do everything for me. He was gonna help me and push me along. And I was able to, find a job that I wanted to do, which was I became a gunner's mate. I ended up picking up E5. I was a second class petty officer. Okay. And then before going to another assignment. All right. So now moving forward, I'm in a different assignment. I'm in, 5 years in the military, and I meet another mentor. And this time I met a Marine gunny. And gunny English was assigned to a Navy unit to train sailors in military police work. So he was the Marine cadre assigned to our unit, and I was a gunner's mate assigned to teach small arms marksmanship. And from the moment we met, he asked me where I was going from there. And at that time, I was unsure what I wanted to do. I kind of felt a little complacent. I think that one of the reasons why he asked me these questions was because I lacked a little bit of motivation, and looked like he saw that I, maybe needed a little push, maybe a little kick. And we talked. He believed in me. He said that, hey, you have a lot of good skills. Don't let them go to waste. And for the next 3 years, he was my mentor. And believe it or not, one of the things that can really crush your heart and believe is not having confidence in yourself. If you don't have the confidence to do anything, it's really difficult. It can be a difficult life, a career or personal life. It can be very difficult. And I felt like those 3 years of my mid-career in my first 10 years was very instrumental to me, because I values that had already been instilled in me, but I learned how to actually grab them and really understand where I was going. And I just, believe that gunny English got that out of me. Basically, like he said, was you know what you're doing, you know where to go. You just have to actually execute now. And as simple as that, that part of my life was very successful because of my mentor. And I've had a lot of other mentors, but I believe that these two are the foundation of who I am today in my Navy career. Now, pushing forward, becoming a senior enlisted, later becoming a warrant officer, I can tell you that when I retired as a CW5, I put a post on LinkedIn letting everyone know that I'm retiring and about how blessed I was to have the opportunity to serve for 35 years. I got a lot of comments back, and one of the comments that stood out to me was from a sailor that I had talked to years and years ago. And that sailor told me that I provided some nuggets that made him who he is today. Those nuggets of mentorship went a long ways. I had forgotten about who this person was until I saw his name. And he thanked me for giving him those small pieces of advice, because that helped him in his career and his personal life. So a lot of times we're mentoring people and we don't even know that's what we're doing. And that's what being a good leader is that you do things so naturally that, you don't think about like, okay, I'm looking at the clock and say, okay, I'm mentoring now. No, it just comes naturally. And one of the things that I always tell sailors or law enforcement officers is I tell them, be consistent in what you do. Know what you want, understand how or what you need to do to get there, and put yourself in that position to be successful. I failed a lot of times. I didn't get selected for the next rank many times, but I never ever stopped trying. I never gave up. And so when the time came, I was ready. And when the time came and I got selected for the next pay grade, it wasn't because I was lucky. It was because I did the work that was required, but I went above and beyond to get that job done as well. So that's one of the things that I always tell people. Don't give up. Continue to work hard. One day it'll pay off. If it doesn't, then you choose another path. Choose a different way to get it done. There's more than one way to get things done. And, just don't stop trying.
Awesome. Well, that's great advice, and it's important to see how mentorship can help other people and how it helps people like you and other people mentor you, and how important it is to give back too. Because some of my mentors, I never expected them to say yes to become my mentors, but for some reason they did. You know, that helps me a lot as well.
And you know what, Danny? Till this day, I call my friends who served in the military with me, who served in law enforcement with me. I always consult with them on, whatever issues I got going on. And I always ask for advice. You're never too old to ask for advice. And that's one of the things that I think people forget is that you may have reached the epitome of your career, but it doesn't mean you know everything. It just means that hey, you've been successful, but there are things out there that we don't know about, and sometimes those things come and you're like, oh wow, I didn't expect this, so I'm gonna call my friend and say, hey, what do you think about this, and how do you think I should approach? There's nothing wrong with asking others for assistance.
Yeah, and it's also something that I'm trying to learn and to get better with, is not let my ego override things like that, like either seeking for advice for help or just to stay grounded and realizing that I don't know everything. I still have a lot to learn, and it's better to have people around you who can support me on that journey as well. And it applies to many different contexts. That I believe anything from the military to civilian context, maybe to personal relationships as well. And before we wrap up the episode, do you have a final message or a final word, something that we haven't had a chance to discuss, or maybe something that you want to re-emphasize maybe for the listeners in their 20s, who might be inspired by what you did, and something that you want to tell them?
Yes, believe in yourself. A lot of times, people give up because nothing has worked for them. And, I come from a background where, we didn't have a lot of means. And so it was either, there was a choice. There's always a choice. It was, do drugs or do something for myself, do something positive for myself. Drugs, gangs were available, where I grew up. And a lot of people felt to that because it was the easiest path to take. Or do a little bit of work and do something for yourself. I was a terrible student in high school, and I didn't think that I could get good grades in college. And that's one of the reasons why I enlisted in the Navy. And through the years, I built confidence, more and more confidence. And now, I can say I have a master's degree in psychology. And I would have never thought I could do it when I was in high school. And it doesn't mean you have to know everything in high school as to how your life is going to it's going to take you. But little by little, doing a little bit of work at a time, you're going to surprise yourself as to how far you can get. I believe that mindset, having that mindset, positive mindset, to believe that you can do whatever you want is so key to your success. And I don't mean by like, okay, I'm just going to be positive and I'm going to let things come to you. No. It means that you're going to go out there and do the work. And eventually that work is going to pay off. And if it doesn't, you just keep trying. As I mentioned earlier, I failed many times. And a lot of times I look at myself and say, wow, if I hadn't failed here, I would have never found out about this. And so sometimes you can look at failure as success. There's many ways to phrase that. There's so many different ways, but only yourself can make a difference in your life. Other people can always help you. You can have all the mentors in the world, but ultimately you're driving that ship, and ultimately you are the one steering it. And you have to be able to say, hey, I'm going to go left, I'm going to go right, or I'm going to go straight ahead yourself. Your mind can do a lot of things. So your choice.
Awesome. Well, that was a great episode. Thank you for sharing your story and lessons, and a lot of it, probably all of it, resonates with me. So that's definitely something that everyone can apply to their lives and to become a better person and to give back and to just live a better life. Despite whatever life throws into you, you can always push forward to your goals and find the way to get there. Again, appreciate you coming over and sharing all this. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Danny. And it was my pleasure to do this with you today.
Absolutely.